Welcome in to the morning after. It is a beautiful Monday morning. I am your host, Jared Smith. It is the morning after another week in the NFL. And boy, was it wacky. It is the morning after Hugh Freeze getting fired. Another head coach firing in college football. It just seems like every time we do a show on a Monday morning, there is another head coach getting fired. It really is a wild and wacky college football world we are living in. As the episode of Ballers and Billions has another chapter. That is, of course, what is happening in college football right now. And the bailout fund, the college football dead coach money fund added to it. We'll get to that in a minute. Excited to be with you today. Again, this is the fifth episode of the show, which means we've been going strong for a month. We crossed 500 subscribers on YouTube last week. Congrats to us. At the end of the day, that is a drop in the bucket for what my main goal is. Please, I'm begging you guys. If you're watching, I know there's a couple of you watching live. Thank you. Please subscribe to the show. Please subscribe to the channel. It's free. If you learn anything about sports, about betting, about life, if you are entertained in any way, shape, or form, if I make you laugh in any way, shape, or form, or even if you just hate watch the show. I know there's a lot of haters out there. I read all the tweets. Just click the subscribe button. It's no skin off your back, and you will continue to have content that you can love or hate on as we move forward with this project. Very excited again. Big show today. As we start to turn the page on what I think is time to shine in the NFL. I mean, honestly, what we saw yesterday, and we'll get to the recaps in just a minute, really starting to see that separation between the haves and the have-nots. Although a lot of the teams that are the haves, or maybe considered to be the haves, lost yesterday. But one game in the NFL does not define you. So just like one show doesn't define me, just like one bet doesn't define any of you. But I'll be called a fraud anyways because I went 0-5 with my contest picks yesterday. A lot of people out there think I'm a fraud. What am I exactly a fraud of? I don't understand it. I always love when I get that. Jared's a fraud. What am I, like, advertising that I'm going to, like, win every bet that I make? All right, cheers to all of you guys. Excited to be with you here on the Morning After episode number 5. All right, let's start in the college football world. Another coach got fired yesterday. It seems like I feel like a broken record. Every week on the show I do this. Hugh Freeze has been given the boot at Auburn after their hellaciously bad performance against Kentucky the other day. To be fair, though, Kentucky's got this like knack for covering big numbers. I think there's something about Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops, all of the coaches around him are getting fired, right? Napier at Florida, Sam Pittman at Arkansas, now Hugh Freeze at Auburn. But little old Mark Stoops keeps covering numbers and keeps his job at Kentucky. But that was the big story over the weekend was Hugh Freeze and his $15 million buyout. Auburn's going to pay all that money. If you add up all of the head coach fired bailout money, or buyout money, I should say, the FBS total, let me do this again because we're going to clip this and it'll be a meme later, hopefully. The FBS total, if you add up all of the head coaches fired in the FBS this year, the total buyout money is now approaching $200 million. It's like the GDP for a small country. It's really insane. Hugh Freeze, $15 million into the pot. Obviously, we have the James Franklin and Brian Kelly buyouts that are leading the way, hovering around $50 million. Billy Napier, I think, was in the 20 range. Sam Pittman had a few million. And then you kind of filter down the rest of the FBS world, and there's a few smaller coaches that, pennies on the dollar compared to what, Hugh Freeze and Kelly and Franklin are adding and Napier. But still, it all adds up. And now we are at $200 million, almost $200 million in head coach, or should I say dead coach, buyout money. As we've mentioned on prior shows, college football right now is the love child of ballers and billions. It's all about the swag, all about the money, all about what have you done for me lately. And I don't know if we're there yet, but any more of these head coaches get fired before the end of the season, college football might be asking for a government bailout. That's how much money is being paid for these coaches not to work at their current jobs. Pretty remarkable. So the next question, obviously, what is next for Auburn? It's a pretty job. It's a pretty decent job. It really is. I think I would probably lean to a James Franklin. I would probably lean to a coach that has had success in the past at levels on par with Auburn. Like if you take what Penn State has done over the last, I think it's 10, 12 years with James Franklin, right? 9-3, 10-2. Auburn would sign up for that every year. And I think that's where a guy like Franklin, who it does appear like he's going to get a job again pretty quickly, I think he'd be a pretty decent fit. I think when I look at the college football coaching carousel, we did this on last week's show. I'll do it again. I still think LSU is the best job available. I got some pushback on that on social media. It really doesn't matter what I post these days. I'm going to get pushback on social media. But I do think LSU is the best job available. I think Penn State and Florida are kind of 2A, 2B. I think you can make a case for both of them being in that number 2 spot, depending on who you ask and maybe what part of the country they live in. But they're both kind of right there. But I still think they're both a notch behind LSU. I just think LSU is one of those jobs that there's only maybe 4 or 5 coaches in the country that wouldn't pick up the phone if LSU called. I think we all know who they are. It's Kirby Smart, it's Ryan Day, it's Kalen DeBoer, it's probably Steve Sarkisian. I think those are the top 4 that probably are not going anywhere, regardless of what the price tag is. I just think those jobs are the elite jobs in college football right now: Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas. But I would put LSU in that category. I would. I'd put LSU right there. Maybe like a baby step below that top 4. If there was a second tier, LSU is the top of that second tier. But it's not quite Georgia. It's not quite Bama. It's definitely not Ohio State. I think Ohio State, frankly, is the best spot in college football right now because they play in the Big Ten. And let's be honest, there's 2.5 teams in the Big Ten, Oregon and Indiana. And that's it. All you got to do is either beat one of those teams, or if you're fortunate, like Ohio State is this year, and you don't play any of them. Ohio State doesn't play either of the 2 top teams in the Big Ten this year. I mean, again, I don't want to say it's a cakewalk for Ryan Day because they have to play Texas. And, Penn State battled for a half. Illinois didn't really offer much. But when it's all said and done, if Michigan drops a game before the last game of the year and they're not ranked, there's a chance Ohio State plays 2 ranked games the whole year. And obviously the game against Texas, they were number 1 at the time, but Texas is not, that was hype. That was froth. Texas is not a top 5 team. I think they're, borderline playoff team, but that's probably the best Texas will show you this year, 9-3. Illinois is not as good as people thought, right? 3 losses already, and we're not even through the bulk of the Big Ten yet. So that win over Illinois looks very frothy, right? They lost to Washington by 70. They actually lost to Washington by as many points as they lost to Ohio State, and they got absolutely blasted by Indiana. There are 2 really good teams in the Big Ten, and I think Oregon is right on the cusp, but they're still young, and I still think in the big moments, Oregon's not quite there. So Ohio State, that's why Ohio State's the best job in college football, guys. It really is. And we'll get to more college football predictions coming up a little later in the show. But the coaching carousel keeps spinning. Add Auburn's name to the mix. I think Auburn saw that the hiring process was quickly establishing itself. I would not be surprised if some of these big-name schools, Penn State, LSU, Florida, and now Auburn, all have their head coaching jobs filled before the college football playoff starts, right? The transfer portal, the recruiting cycle, it comes quick. So these teams really have to really have to figure things out really quick, or else they're going to be picking second, right? Sloppy seconds for these teams if they don't get their head coaching situations buttoned up quick. But Auburn moves on from Hugh Freeze. It'll be DJ Durkin, the interim head coach for Auburn. Let's actually look. Right, we always love these head coach bounces, even though Florida did cover over the weekend, but they did not win against Georgia. Auburn play. How about this? Auburn plays Vandy this week. No bye week. Auburn at Vandy this week. That would be some upset because Vandy's still very much in the mix, controls their own destiny for the college football playoff. They have to go to Tennessee the last week of the year. But Auburn plays Vandy this week, and then they finish. They play Mercer in between. They have a bye week. They play Mercer, and then they finish at home against Alabama. So we'll see if DJ Durkin can play spoiler in his interim role over the final few weeks of the year. All right, let's move on to the NFL. Wild week 9. Of course, last week I said ugly dogs are dying. And I still believe that to be true, but it was just a weird week in the NFL where the favorites really struggled. 5-8 against the spread. You had some pretty significant upsets. Panthers over the Packers was the big boy. We'll get to that in a minute. And then the Vikings over the Lions. Quietly, Detroit's offense has kind of been trending down over the last few weeks. But you credit J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota. Nice job coming back from injury and looking damn good. A lot better than the Vikings looked under Carson Wentz the prior Thursday against the Chargers. So those upsets were probably, pretty suicidal for your survivor pools. But it was an interesting weekend in the NFL. I think when you start, let's just recap the games. Let's start with Thursday night. Nice job. Lamar Jackson came back and looked fresh. This Ravens team, I think, deserves to be the favorite in the AFC North. I know Pittsburgh had a nice win yesterday over Indy, but I still think Baltimore's got the inside track because they've got 2 games in hand against the Steelers, and I just think the Ravens are the better team. And I think they'll not win out, but maybe you're going to have to win out if they want to go over their win total, which was 10.5 pre-flop. They've already got 5 losses, so if they lose another game, the best they can go is 11-6. So I guess they have to only lose one more game down the stretch. But the Ravens are a very formidable team, guys. I think we have to ignore those first few weeks of data points without Lamar Jackson. And, the Bills game was nuts. Could have gone either way. They dropped that one. And then, of course, they lose the Lions game. And the Lions are a really good team, and they get blasted by the Chiefs. But since then, you kind of have to ignore that Texans game. You have to kind of ignore that Rams game, even though they battled in that Rams game with Tyler Huntley. I think you throw out the Bears game too, frankly. I really think the Ravens season and how you grade Baltimore should start last Thursday. And you should use that as kind of your jumping off point with Baltimore. Like, for example, I've got Baltimore right now as still one of my best teams in my power ratings. I've got them in the top 5. I've got them 5 points better than an average team. I've got them a field goal behind the Chiefs. So I'm not penalizing the Ravens for that, slow start. I think they are one of the best teams in the league, and I think they'll be at the top of the AFC North standings after it's all said and done. They play the Vikings this week, then Browns, Jets, Bengals, Steelers, Bengals, Patriots, Packers, Steelers. I mean, again, they could easily not run the table, but finish. What are they now? They're 3-5 now, so they have 9 games left. They could easily go 7-2 and finish 10-7, and maybe that wins the division this year. Who knows? Maybe they need to get to 11 in order to unseat the Steelers, who had a really nice win yesterday. Speaking of Pittsburgh, that was the I don't want to say the most impressive result of the day because they were badly outgained in that game. And the Colts did a really good job continuing to put pressure on the Steelers defense. The problem is they turned it over so damn much, right? Like, this is the great equalizer in the NFL. Pittsburgh only gained 3.7 yards per play. They were held to a 40% success rate on offense. But when you force 6 turnovers, it really doesn't matter what you do on offense. I believe the Steelers had gone multiple games in a row without a turnover, and they forced 6 of them against the Colts yesterday. I saw a note that Indy is now 2-2 against winning teams. So how good are the Colts, really? And it goes back to, they're grading out so well, and Daniel Jones is having this great year. I don't know if he's still first in EPA per play after yesterday, but he was first heading into the day. But in a close game against the Chiefs, against the Ravens, against the Bills, are you really trusting Daniel Jones and the Colts offense? I'm not. I would take all of those experienced quarterbacks over Jones and the Colts in a playoff game. I think what the Colts are doing right now is putting together an elite regular season. We've seen Tennessee do this in years past. We've seen other teams do this in years past. And then you get to the playoffs and they fall flat on their face because they're just not ready for the big moments. But we'll see. Right now, the Colts still 7-2. They lead the AFC, but they have got a lot of work to do because I think a lot of people are going to be doubting them with their record against winning teams. Speaking of winning, the Bears, I don't know how they won that game yesterday. 47-42 over the Bengals. I saw a note, and this is just a crazy note. So the Bengals are 2-4 straight up under Zach Taylor in games where they score 35 or more points since the start of last year. So they've had 6 games in the last season plus where they have scored 35 or more points, and they've only won 2 of those 6 games. By the way, the rest of the NFL is 84-6 in that stretch. Insane. Cincinnati's defense is next level bad. I'm not running to praise the Bears for this win. The Bears seem to be putting together one of the most insane luck box seasons in recent memory. They won back-to-back games by the same score by a single point. Very fortunate in the Washington game, right? How bad did Washington look last night against Seattle? We'll get to that game in a little bit. But you barely get past the Commanders. You needed a late fumble on a fluke play to get past the Commanders. You beat the Raiders by a point. You get waxed by Tyler Huntley and the Ravens, and then you need just an insane comeback in the final minute. And you give up 40-plus to the Bengals. And Joe Flacco has got a bad arm. I mean, just I can't stress enough how fadeable the Chicago team is. The Bears were fortunate; they were +3 in the turnover margin. You gained 7.5 yards per player, +3 in the turnover margin, and you still need a late touchdown to win the game on a crazy play that really should have been tackled at midfield. And maybe they, get into field goal range anyway and win it, but I ain't high on this Bears team. I'm looking to fade them every possible angle. We mentioned the Vikings win over the Lions, one of the bigger upsets of the day. Nice win, but not a very sexy box score win. They were outgained. They got sacked. J.J. McCarthy got sacked 5 times. They were very clean on third downs, committed a few too many penalties for my liking. I'm not very high on this Minnesota team with J.J. McCarthy. I just think you caught Detroit in a bad spot, and the defense just was really giving Jared Goff problems. I mean, that was, again, 5 sacks on the other side, too, for the Lions. That was a defensive win. That was a Brian Flores gut one out, hold on late, and J.J. McCarthy did just enough. Only 1 turnover, just enough for the Vikings to get across the finish line. They won by a field goal on the road. Still a nice win. Not taking any. Listen, you win in the NFL. I don't care what the final is, what the fluke is. I'm still giving you credit for the win, but we have to now spin this forward, and you have to ask, are you upgrading? Are you downgrading teams? I'm not upgrading the Vikings based on yesterday. Not significantly, maybe a half a point. But in reality, I just thought their defense kind of willed them to that one, and it was not a dominant performance by any stretch. Biggest upset of the day, and this was, again, a very fluky, very coin flippy kind of game that just landed on tails for Green Bay. They outgained Carolina by a full net yard per play. They gained almost 6 yards per play, but they turned it over twice. They were 1 for 5 in the red zone. Jordan Love just kind of looked like he had his head in the clouds. And you credit Carolina, right? You give up the game-tying score. You actually, frankly, they should have been up 8 and missed the extra point. I think it was a penalty. Extra point got backed up. They missed the extra point. So they're only up 7. They give up the game-tying touchdown. And then Carolina drives it right down the field and gets into field goal range and kicks the game-winning field goal. So you give Bryce Young a lot of credit for that drive, but by no means was that a dominant performance by Carolina. I'm not in a hurry to upgrade Carolina based off of that. Maybe you downgrade Green Bay because you slept walk a little bit, and they should be a dominant team, but you're not beating these dominant teams. They're 2 losses this year to Carolina and Cleveland. And we'll get to them a little later in the show. Maybe they're a Rise and Whine candidate. But really tough to take them seriously when you're losing those games. And Carolina, very fluky team, very up and down team, very tough to get a read on Carolina from week to week. Chargers win, no cover at the Titans. Not much to get to here. It was kind of belt to ass. Frankly, the Titans were fortunate to cover. Plus 24% net success rate for the Chargers. The difference was the pick six on the first drive. Like that was the reason that the Chargers were unable to cover that game. Just one bad throw for Justin Herbert. Not going to upgrade the Chargers because they lost Joe Alt in the game, and that's big. We'll keep an eye on his status throughout the week. But you saw what happened when the Chargers really struggled on the offensive line. They got pushed around by the Commanders a couple weeks ago. That's bad if Joe Alt has to miss serious time because they're really thin on the offensive line right now, and they're thin at the running back position. Justin Herbert took 6 sacks yesterday. They were fortunate, frankly, that they went 3 for 4 in the red zone and Tennessee went 0 for 2 because with that pick six on the opening drive and losing your starting left tackle, your stud left tackle, they could have very easily lost that game yesterday. But Herbert pulled out a win, and the Chargers, at least for now, stay above reproach in terms of criticizing them for their game yesterday. But still some holes, and you hope that all gets healthy. Weird game in New England. I was on the Patriots. I had a terrible day in the contest. I got sucked out. I got Chargers. I was on the Chargers. That got sucked out. I was on New England, 4th down, and I think it was 4th and goal for Atlanta on the final drive. And Drake London makes a crazy catch in the back of the end zone or in the front corner of the end zone, kind of leaning towards the sideline where his butt barely touched inbounds. Crazy game, and they missed the extra point. And they lose by 1. Atlanta outgained them, though. Success rate was kind of even. New England had 2 turnovers. That was the reason why Atlanta was able to hang in the game. Because I didn't think the Falcons played overly well. But their defense got after Drake May. That's the thing with Drake May, guys. Drake May's not going to win the MVP this year. He's not. I'm sorry. He's just not. He's taken way too many sacks. It is going to cost New England a game at some point. Didn't cost them yesterday. Hasn't cost them too much this year. But Drake May holding on to the ball. He had a fumble that was almost returned, I think, for a touchdown. Drake May's holding on to the ball way too long. He has not yet evolved as a quarterback to the point where he can have that internal clock. It is, I'm holding on to it. I want to make the play. I want to make the play. I want to make the play. Sack fumble. We're seeing that way too much. I'm telling you, mark it down. It is going to cost New England a big game at some point in the second half. And the fact that it hasn't cost them a game in the first half of the year should be even more scary. Because usually, you can get away with it for a while. You can get away with it like you did yesterday, where you get sacked 6 times, you still win the game by a point. But eventually in the NFL, it's going to catch up with you. It is going to catch up with New England in a big moment. I'll take a guess. It's probably in the Buffalo game coming up in a few weeks. Let's actually see what the Patriots' schedule is like. I do think we have reached peak pricing on New England, right? They were a 3-point favorite on the look ahead yesterday, and then they stretch out to 6, and I think the line closed 4.5. Like, to me, that's and they win by 1. Like, to me, that's kind of the indicator that we're a little bit too over the skis on this New England team. Like, they go to Tampa next week, they're a dog. I think a lot of people are going to want to bet New England next week as a dog, and I think the line next week is kind of telling you that Tampa's the right side. I'll probably be on Tampa in that game, but listen, if you're fading all of my contest picks and my NFL sides, I've been doing better in props and totals this year, but my sides in college football and the NFL, like, I can't pick a winner on a side to save my life right now. It's like everything. The Houston game yesterday, let's get to that one. I mean, dead nuts right side Houston. First half, C.J. Stroud moving it up and down. Denver barely keeping themselves in it with a couple of explosive plays, and then C.J. Stroud gets knocked out. And even despite that, the Texans still had a chance to win that game in the fourth quarter. But my luck lately has just been awful with sides. And getting C.J. Stroud knocked out in that game was a clear example. Denver barely outgained Houston. Houston had nothing offensively after Stroud got knocked out. You could just see the drop off from Stroud to Davis Mills, was significant. I was going back in the old time machine with Derek Carr and the Texans. 4 sacks. 0 for 3 in the red zone. 3 for 17 on third downs. I mean, just a dismal performance for Houston offensively after Stroud got knocked out of the game. But hey, you credit Denver going on the road, getting a good win against a tough defense, even though they were a -2 in the turnover margin, which was the widest margin of the day. Both the Patriots and the Broncos, -2 turnover margin, still won the NFL game. You just don't see that too often in the NFL. If you're a -2 in turnovers, you are typically losing in the NFL. Um, Niners ho-hum over the Giants. Not much to get to there. Niners, frankly, outplayed them in most phases. Christian McCaffrey continues to be a stud. If you backed his props yesterday, you were feeling good. He was on my fantasy team. He's one of the reasons I won. San Francisco keeps stringing games together without Brock Purdy. I mean, you would imagine Brock Purdy at some point is going to come back and play pretty well because the rest of this offense keeps humming. So, cheers to the Niners because I need them to get to 11 wins. That's one of my biggest win totals of the year. The Packers over 9.5 is the other one. I still think the Packers will get there, even though there was two terrible losses this year to Cleveland and Carolina. But I still think they'll get to 10. I think the Giants are kind of dead stick. I think they battled for a few weeks. They showed you their ceiling a few moments with Jackson Dart, but they have nothing. They have nothing offensively. Jackson Dart, again, holds on to it way too long. He's kind of the diet version of Drake May right now, just trying to make plays. And I respect and applaud his effort and enthusiasm, but there was a sack where he was like, he peeled out of the pocket and he was like waiting, and the defensive lineman came from the backside, so Dart couldn't see him. And I'm shocked that Jackson held on to the ball, but he's gonna get hurt at some point. Like we've already seen him go in the concussion protocol 10 and kind of dance around the raindrops through these injuries. But I think Jackson Dart, mark my words, it's not going to be pretty. But there's going to be a game this year where Jackson Dart just gets eviscerated and he gets knocked out of the game. Because I just think these young quarterbacks, I don't think they realize how much they have to protect themselves. It is a jungle out there, man. Like, you are dodging bullets every single play. We saw Jaden Daniels last night, too. We'll get to him in a minute. But I think these young quarterbacks just need to be very careful because the worst thing that you could do is put yourself in a situation where you just can't play because you're hurt. We mentioned the Colts losing to the Steelers. I think I'm downgrading Pittsburgh. I think I'm downgrading Indy, but I'm not upgrading Pittsburgh. I know that sounds weird, but I just think we got a little too stretched on the Colts, right? And I'm not overly high on the Steelers because, 6 turnovers in a game is incredibly fluky, and they still could only win by 1 score, and they only gained 3.5 yards per play. I'm not overly high on the Steelers, but I just think the Colts kind of showed you that there's a ceiling there. I think Indy is a good, not great team. I would not put Indy in the upper echelon of the NFL. I would not put them in the Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, Packers, Eagles, Seahawks, Rams. I would not put them in that tier. I would put them in the tier of they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to win a bad AFC South. Maybe not, actually, after what the Jags did yesterday. And then they're going to lose in probably the first round of the playoffs. Like, I do not see, unless they get this a crazy easy matchup and it's kind of a fluky game, but I don't see the Colts making it to the AFC Championship game. I don't see them winning 2 playoff games. I guess it's conceivable they could get the bye, and they would only need to win 1 playoff game to get to the championship. But if they do get the bye, they're going to be like Detroit last year, one and done in the playoffs. That's just the way I feel on Indy this year. I think they're going to put some really good regular season numbers out there. They feasted on some bad teams, but they're 2-2 against winning teams. I think we need to really temper our expectations with the Colts. Daniel Jones is having a really good year. Shane Steichen's probably going to win Coach of the Year. He deserves it. Shane Steichen deserves to win Coach of the Year. If the Colts with Daniel Jones win 11 games and win the South, he deserves to win Coach of the Year. But I don't see them winning a playoff game, and if they do, it'll be a wild card game, and they'll squeak by, and then they'll lose in the divisional round against the Ravens or the Bills or the Chiefs or one of those types of teams. The Jags, hey, listen, I thought there were multiple points in that game where they were going to fold up the tent. The Raiders were kind of punching them in the mouth. Good on the Raiders, honestly. 5.5 yards per play, 53% success rate on offense. We've been critical of that offense, but they showed you some really positive things yesterday. They were 3 for 4 in the red zone, 7 for 10 on third downs. But the problem was they couldn't get a stop in the final minute when they needed it. And the Jags just, right, like Raiders take that lead on the final drive, and then the Jags just let them go right down the field. Terrible beat on my under 44. That game was 9-6 entering the fourth quarter, and then 31 points in the fourth quarter. 23 all, goes to overtime. I lose the under. The Rams, belt to ass over the Saints. This was the widest success rate margin of the week, plus 26%. Not much to get to here. Tyler Shuck didn't really show much. Although, to be fair, 5.5 yards per play, not terrible. But 2 for 9 on third downs, 1 for 3 in the red zone, 2 turnovers. I mean, the Saints are, right, like we envision. I think I have the Saints right now as my worst team in the NFL with Tyler Shuck. I do. I have him as a -10. I have Tennessee, Cincinnati, and New Orleans as my 3 worst teams right now in the NFL. Cincinnati is going to be a really fun team, but they're not going to win a lot of games with that defense. Kansas City loses to Buffalo. I was on the Chiefs. Another one of my the setbacks yesterday. I cannot pick sides right now in the NFL to save my life. Totals and props are fine, but I cannot pick sides. You should be fading all my sides in the NFL. That being said, I didn't really think the Bills were overly dominant. They were the better football team, no doubt. But Patrick Mahomes played his worst game of the year. And the most inaccurate game of his entire career. How about this stat? First game in his NFL career, 142 starts, sub 50% completion rate. And they still only lost by a score and had a chance to tie on the final drive. I still think the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL, guys. I had the Bills 2 points behind the Chiefs coming into the game yesterday. I had them 3 points behind the Chiefs. I had them 3 points behind the Chiefs. I had Kansas City at a 9. I had Buffalo at a 6, which is why I thought the line made sense. Kansas City as a slight road favorite. I upgraded Buffalo a point because their defense played well, and that was a surprise. But I downgraded Kansas City by 1 point because I thought that their offense needed to play better in that spot. But I still have Kansas City a point ahead of Buffalo. So if the two teams played on a neutral tomorrow, if they played in Kansas City for an AFC Championship game, I might have the Chiefs favored by a full field goal. In Buffalo for an AFC Championship game or an AFC divisional game, pick them. Maybe Buffalo a slight favorite, half a point favorite. But it would probably be a pick them because let's be honest, if the Chiefs are a dog, everyone's betting the Chiefs in that spot. They weren't a dog yesterday, though. They were a favorite. So I think that's why you had to maybe reconsider your wager because it is fair to say that these two teams right now are a coin flip, right? I have Kansas City a point better. That's really not much. And I think Kansas City still, if Mahomes plays even average, I mean, Mahomes was very rare to get a below average game from Mahomes. I think if Mahomes plays average yesterday, Chiefs probably win. But you credit Buffalo. Their defense threw him off kilter. They were 3 for 13 on third downs. They had 1 failed attempt in the red zone. That was the difference. Those 2 metrics and the turnover were the difference in the game. And Kansas City did not put their best stuff on offense. And I think if they played again, I think the Chiefs would watch that film on defense, and I think they'd make adjustments. And I think their offense will play better. I do. So I hope we get a return matchup. I hope it's in Buffalo. And I hope the Chiefs are a dog because I will be on the Chiefs once again. And finally, the game last night, belt to ass. Almost 9 yards per play for Seattle. Sam Darnold looked great. We'll get to him a little later in the show, but Darnold looks fantastic. I think he is the poster child for why you do not give up on talented quarterbacks early on in their career. I think you have to let them develop, and you have to put the right coaches in their ear, or else they're never going to reach full potential. But Seattle's a legit team, guys. I have Seattle right now as my 3rd best team in the NFC, tied with the Eagles. I have the Rams and the Lions just ahead of them, but Seattle's right there. If Seattle played LA at home, and we're going to get that game in a couple weeks, I'd make that game a pick'em. I would honestly make that game a pick'em. I'd make the Rams a favorite in LA. But I think, is that the game this week? No, I think they play Arizona this week. They play the Rams next week. 2 huge games coming up for Seattle. You get the Cardinals at home, trying to avoid the letdown after the dominant performance. I think they'll be okay in that spot because the Cardinals play on Monday night, so short week for them. Then they're going on the road. And then you play the Rams next Sunday. It's an afternoon game, late game on Fox. Very excited for that game. That is going to be a very telling game. Seahawks at Rams, and then they play again in Week 17 on a Thursday night in Seattle. That is going to be what decides the division, I believe. I think San Francisco is going to be right there, but I think the division is going to be decided between Seattle and LA. It's actually a good point. When does my computer's being a little bit slow here? But I'm actually curious when they play. They've already played. The Seahawks have already played the Niners. My computer's being very slow here. Excuse me. Completely frozen. Well, we're gonna have to look at that later because I can't get access to ESPN right now. Oh, here we go. Sorry, just had to restart there for a minute. See, that's the beauty of live TV. Let's look at the Niners schedule. Actually, I think the Niners they beat the Seahawks in Week 1, and then they play them again the last week of the year. Yeah, that's gonna be. Actually, I was wrong. The Seahawks Rams game is not Week 17. It's like Week 15 on a Thursday night. Yeah, I think right now. So all three of those teams have 6 wins. The Niners have played one extra game. They're 6-3. The Rams and the Seahawks are 6-2. I'd have to look at the odds to see what I like there. I'll be honest. I might consider a bet on the Rams if they're a plus money dog right now in that division. I don't know. They might be odds on. NFC West. Oh, the odds are not posted right now, unfortunately, on BetMGM. Let's see if they're posted on FanDuel. Divisions. What are the NFC West odds? Yeah, the Rams right now plus 125, Seahawks plus 160. Yeah, I would consider the Rams. Again, you get the home game next. So they play the Seahawks at home first. So if they win that game, it'll be odds on. The issue is the Rams have already lost to the Niners. That's the issue. And the Rams, that's the game this week. Oh, boy. Big game for the Rams this week. My guess is you'll see Purdy. Actually, I don't know. That turf toe is nothing to mess with. NFC West is a really good division, guys. It's a really good division. The game tonight, Arizona, Dallas, I don't have much. I think I'll be on the under most likely. I think that was what the number was telling me, but it doesn't, I don't really see a ton of value there. I would probably lay off the game and look at the prop market. Don't ask me to bet a side because I can't pick sides in the NFL to save my life. We do have some numbers out for this week. If we spin things ahead to week 10 in the NFL as we turn the halfway point. Thursday night game, Raiders at Broncos. What do I make this game? I'll look at what I make all the games this week, and I'll give you my early lines. I make it 9.5, so not really much value there. Let me pull up the line so I have them all in front of me, and I can see where I'm off. I can see if I have any value here. Yeah, let's get some early Week 9 predictions. Falcons at Colts, I make it 4.5. It's 5.5. You would think maybe. We're getting, again, still maybe a little bit ahead of our skis with this Colts team. I would probably lean to the Colts there, or excuse me, to the Falcons there, especially if we get if we push towards 6. Giants at Bears, I make it 8.5. The line's 3.5. Something's off there. Maybe my rating on Chicago is just way too high. I would still probably bet the Bears, though. I would. Even though I'm down on Chicago as a team, I think the Giants' offense is kind of lifeless right now. Bucks at Patriots. I make that game 1.5. It's 2.5. I'll probably still be on Tampa. I'm probably not as high. I probably need to be a little higher on Tampa. Coming off the bye, getting a little healthy. I probably should boost Tampa a point. And I think under a field goal, I think you bet Tampa in that spot. Ravens at Vikings, 3.5. I make it 3.5. Not really much there. You would expect Baltimore to win, but hey, McCarthy looked pretty good last week. So maybe Baltimore at north of 3. Gotta be a little careful there. Jags at Texans. I had this spot circled since the summer, and the CJ Stroud injury ruined it. The reason I had this spot circled since the summer, teams coming off a game in Vegas that are going on the road the following week, we call it the Vegas flu game, are 1-14 against the spread since the Raiders moved to Vegas like 5 years ago. But of course, we have no idea if CJ Stroud's going to play. Texans are a 1-point favorite right now. I have them at 3.5, but that's with CJ Stroud. I have no idea if CJ Stroud's going to play. If he does play, I bet Houston. For sure, bet Houston. Really low total game, too. The Texans' defense is legit. The Texans need that game real bad. And the Jags coming off a win in overtime, back on the road. Like, it's a terrible spot for Jacksonville, but I just have no idea if CJ Stroud's going to play. The Bills are a big favorite at Miami, 9.5. I make that game 9.5. So I'm not going to do much there. Panthers, 5.5-point favorite over the Saints. I make that game 10.5. I depress my team. That's why I'm really low on the Giants too. Like when I'm down on a team, I am aggressive on that team to the downside. Maybe I upgraded Carolina a little too much for their win yesterday. But if it's a 5-point difference between my line and the sportsbook line, I have to bet it. I have to bet Carolina -5. We're down clearly on the Saints. We're very down on the Saints. The Jets are a 2-point favorite against the Browns. I make it 1.5. Not going to really do much there. Seahawks 7-point favorite over Arizona. I make it 6.5. Probably not going to do much there. Obviously, Seattle, you upgrade Seattle big after yesterday, and we just don't know what Arizona's going to be with Kyler back. We'll see what we get from Arizona on Monday night. Rams, a 3.5-point road favorite at San Francisco. I make it 6.5. I'm really down on San Francisco's numbers, guys. I just don't think. Well, to be fair, hold on. I'm at 6.5 with Mac Jones. I'll probably be closer to a field goal if they get Purdy back in. Right now, where am I at with Purdy? I've got Mac Jones, actually only 2 points downgrade from Purdy. So maybe I'd be at 4.5. So maybe there would be a little bit of value still on the on the Rams at 3.5. But still, it's right around the key number. Not really interested in playing it. I think it's San Francisco or pass, frankly. If Purdy plays. We'll see what the number does with Purdy. Right now, if it's Mac, let's leave it at this. If it's Mac Jones again and the line stays at 3.5, I'm betting the Rams at 3.5 with Mac Jones at quarterback for San Francisco. Detroit is an 8.5-point favorite at Washington. I make it 10.5. And I did make the adjustment for Mariota because obviously Jaden Daniels is out for probably the year. That was a gruesome injury yesterday. Brutal. Why was he even in the game? You have to really ask yourself that question. Why was he even? I got to go back and watch the interview with Dan Quinn to find out why he was even in that game. Down 38-7, and it's the fourth quarter, and he's coming off an injury. Why is he even in that game? And now he's probably done for the year. They also lost McCaffrey and Lattimore last night. Just a brutal night for Washington last night. Bounce back spot for Detroit. I'll probably be on the Lions this week. I make it 10.5, and it's 8.5. So I'll probably be on Detroit, anything south of double digits. Chargers, a 2.5-point. Really, it's 3-point favorite over Pittsburgh at home. I make it 2.5. Probably not going to do much there. Although I kind of think the Chargers at home, if we get under a field goal, I think it's a bad spot for Pittsburgh coming off the win at Indy. And then finally, the Monday night game, Green Bay, a 2.5-point favorite over Philly. I make the game basically a pick'em. So maybe if we get a 3, I'll be on the Eagles. But at 2.5, probably not something I'm really interested in. All right, that is my look for Week 10 in the NFL. You had 4 teams on bye: Bengals, Titans, Cowboys, and Chiefs. So 14 games coming up this week. It'll start Thursday night in Denver. But I would say right now my best looks in terms of the games that are most off from the market, I think Carolina over the Saints. And I think the Bears over the Giants. Those are the games that are the most off from my ratings. And then we'll see what happens with Brock Purdy and Mac Jones. But I might be on the Rams if it is. It's also a revenge spot for the Rams after they lost to San Francisco at home a few Thursdays ago. Yeah, I think I like the Rams in that game, especially if Purdy, even if Purdy comes back. That's the thing about quarterback injuries. The first game a quarterback comes back is not always an upgrade. It takes them a half to get going. Maybe that's the play. Maybe we play Rams in the first half against the Niners next week if Purdy comes back, right? Because if Purdy gets upgraded, maybe that line goes down to 3. Maybe we get under a field goal in the first half. I think Rams first half is going to be a bet for me next week as we look ahead. Week 10 in the NFL. All right. I want to do this before we get to the college football stuff. I want to do this myth versus reality segment that I'm going to try to introduce because I think there are so many times in the NFL and just in general, not just the NFL, but just gambling in general. And I know, again, this is not a gambling show, but I'm going to give you my ratings. I'm going to give you my numbers. I'm going to give you my opinions on betting because it is such an important part of the sports society today. But this is a crazy stat. So the myth is that the NFL is rigged, that if you're betting money on the NFL, you are destined to lose because it's rigged. Well, these sports books are publicly traded companies, which means they have to come out with earnings reports, which means every 3 to 4 months, every quarter, so every 3 months, they will let us know how they're doing. I'm always fascinated to see the in-NFL season earnings reports because the NFL is the most bet on sport. It drives a ton of handle, and it will impact the earnings reports of these sports books. Caesars came out with an earnings report last week, and they said that they are making less money than expected. They are missing their revenue guidance because of favorable customer outcomes in the NFL. Translation, the public is winning in the NFL more than we expected them to. And it is impacting how much money us as a sportsbook is making. Now, does that mean the sportsbook is losing money? No. Obviously, the parlays and the casinos and all the other operations that they're running, they're still profitable. But in the finance world, if you say, I'm going to make this much money, and you end up making this much money, well, you got a problem because you're a publicly traded company and your shareholders are buying or selling based on what your expected revenue will be. And if your expected revenue is significantly less than what you expected it to be because the favorites are covering at a crazy rate in the NFL, well, you've got yourself a problem on your hands when it comes to your stock price and your shareholders. So we need to eliminate the myth that the NFL is rigged and that everything that's supposed to go the sports book's way is going to bounce their way. In the long run, will the sports books make money? Of course. Mostly because of parlays and other things. But right now in the NFL, if you're betting favorites, and I know last week is kind of against this trend, but if you're betting favorites in the NFL every week, you're winning. And what does the public mostly bet? Favorites. If you're betting overs in the NFL every week, I think it's like 54% overs this season. What does the public typically bet? Overs. You're winning. So the myth that the NFL is rigged and you should be betting on the sportsbook side every week because they're going to get the call and the officials are going to rig the game so the sportsbook gets their result that they want. It's garbage. It's fugazi. It's not baked in reality. The reality is this is a very random sport. Right now, we're in a season, we're in a chapter where the favorites are playing really well. I gave you my reason why I think so last week, why the ugly dogs are kind of dying a slow death, even though, again, on Sunday they were thriving. But in general, the quarterback play in the NFL, especially the bottom tier quarterback play in the NFL, is so bad that it's just too much to overcome the point spread right now. Maybe we get an acceleration with how heavy the favorites are being priced, right? Eventually, water will find its level. But right now, we're in a season where the favorites are performing at a historic rate, and the public is winning in the NFL at a historic rate, and that is impacting the sports book's bottom line. So, Mythbusters, the NFL is not rigged. The sports books don't win every week. Yes, they are profitable, but they are not having a great season in the NFL. And their revenue guidance is being impacted because of it. Just food for thought as we turn the halfway mark of the NFL season. All right, let's get to college football. I'll give you my college football playoff predictions like I do every week here on the show. I'll be honest, I struggled with it this week. I really did. I'm kind of caught in between spinning things forward and trying to handicap things that are happening right now. Ohio State is my number one team in the country. They are the best team in the country. They would be favored by at least a field goal, probably more, over everyone else. I think Alabama's going to run the table, and I think that means they will be the number 2 seed in the college football playoff field. If the field was picked today, obviously it would be Indiana or A&M. But Indiana still has to play Ohio State in a Big Ten championship game, and I think A&M is going to drop a game at some point. So I am still, for this week only, next week after we have a full week of ratings to dissect, right, the College Football Playoff Committee will give you their first look of the field this week. I might adjust my strategy, but for now I'm still going to spin it forward into how I think it's going to play out. This is not the College Football Playoff predictions today. This is what I think they will be in 4 or 5 weeks after the season's over. Ohio State 1, Bama 2, Indiana 3, A&M 4, Georgia 5, Ole Miss 6, Oregon 7, Texas Tech, Big 12 champ, huge game for them this week against BYU. Virginia, the ACC is a mess. They're only getting 1 team. Vandy, I'm keeping Vandy in the field. I know they lost to Texas, but I think Texas is going to drop a game to Georgia next week. I think Oklahoma is going to drop a game to Bama next week. And I think Vandy's going to win out and beat Tennessee the last week of the year and get in at 10-2. And I've got Notre Dame also in at 10-2. And in Memphis is my group of 5 team. I'll be honest, I have no idea what's going to happen in the group of 5. I do think there are some sleeper teams that could sneak in. San Diego State's one of them. Look out for San Diego State. San Diego State's got a cupcake of a schedule down the stretch, and they look like one of the best defenses in college football right now. They're 7-1. They play Hawaii, Boise State in 2 weeks. That's going to be the game that will decide their fate, but they're at home. They don't have to go to Boise. Then San Jose State, New Mexico. If San Diego State beats Boise on November 15th, San Diego State might go to the college football playoff, guys, because I could see the AAC, which right now is the best group of 5 conference, to be fair. The AAC deserves, if the AAC has a 1-loss team, that 1-loss team should be in the group of 5 in the college football playoff. But that might not be the case. Like these teams might all knock each other off, and maybe San Diego State can sneak in. It's the 6th straight week I've had Bama winning my national title, and the 5th straight week I've had them beating Ohio State in the title game. Do I think they'd be the favorite in that game? No. But I got to go with my gut. I had Bama winning the championship from the jump. I had them as the best team in the country from week 1 on. And I've got to keep it there. I've got to keep Bama in my number 1 spot because I think Ty Simpson's the best quarterback in the country. Kind of. Although I got to be honest, after what I saw from Julian Sain last week, I might be wavering on that opinion. But I think Ohio State's right there. The Miami and Georgia Tech losses, right? Both Miami and Georgia Tech lost this weekend. The ACC's cooked. They're not getting a second team in. It's a one-and-done league this year. I just don't think it's good enough to get a second team. Notre Dame is kind of the question mark here. I'm going to be fascinated. So when you see the reveal of the college football playoff rankings on Tuesday night, I want you to keep a close eye on who the committee has as the highest ranked 2-loss team. I think that is going to be crucial as we try to spin this thing forward, right? Miami's got 2 losses. Notre Dame has 2 losses. Is Notre Dame ranked ahead of Miami? Because if Notre Dame is ranked ahead of Miami right now, Miami can't jump them. Because Miami's not going to make the ACC championship game. They have no more important ranked games left. And Notre Dame's going to keep reeling off big wins. Because Notre Dame's got just the most cupcake of all cupcake schedules left. So even though Miami beat Notre Dame earlier this year, I still think there's a chance that Notre Dame and Miami both finish the year with 2 losses, and Notre Dame is the one that gets into the college football playoff. Why? Because Miami's 2 losses are bad losses against SMU and Louisville, whereas Notre Dame's 2 losses, field goal to Miami, 1 point to A&M. Quality losses matter in college football, right? We talked about this last year. That's why Bama didn't get in, because their losses were not quality. whereas Notre Dame's 2 losses are pretty quality. Miami's 2 losses are not. SMU's probably not going to be ranked this year, and Louisville might finish in the 20 range, but they're not a top 10, top 15 team like A&M is, and you lost by a point, and you lost by a field goal against Miami, and frankly, we outplayed them for a big percentage of that game. You just fell behind early. So I still think, even though, and it sounds crazy, right? Tiebreaker, Notre Dame, Miami, 2 losses. Miami should get in. They beat Notre Dame. I don't know if it's that simple. So much time has passed between week 1 and when the college football playoff will be decided. I think there's a legit chance that Miami and Notre Dame finish with the same record. Head-to-head win for Miami. Notre Dame gets in the playoff. That's how I see it right now. We mentioned Vandy controls their own destiny. That's because I think Texas and Oklahoma are both going to lose. Now, if Texas beats Georgia next week, if Oklahoma beats Bama next week, well, that's a horse of a different color, a bird of a different feather. I don't think either of those things are going to happen. I think Texas loses to Georgia. I think Bama beats Oklahoma. I'm terrible at picking sides right now in college football. I was dead wrong with my Oklahoma losing at Tennessee over the weekend, but they kept their season alive, and you credit them. So my at-larges right now, I've got 4 in the SEC, A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, Vandy. I've got 2 Big Ten at-larges, Indiana, Oregon. I've got Notre Dame as my independent. That's it. No ACC, no Big 12 in my at-large conversation right now. Sorry, not good enough. Big games this week. Indiana at Penn State. What's the line in that game? I don't even know if I want to look. Penn State. Hey, listen, they battled for a half. I thought I was going to cover the 17.5, but obviously didn't get there. Penn State's a 15.5 point home dog this week. You would think Indiana's going to come in and roll, but maybe this is the one game, right? Indiana's looked so good this year. They really haven't been tested. They go to Oregon and they dominate. That was the one wow game, but outside of that, they just have not been tested. Maybe they get tested this week. Maybe that Penn State defense puts some pressure on Mendoza, right? We saw Maryland a little bit early in the game get to Mendoza. But this is it. I mean, after this, Indiana plays Wisconsin and Purdue. So if they beat Penn State, they're going to go undefeated. And I don't think Mendoza's going to win the Heisman. We'll get to that in a minute, but I definitely think Indiana deserves all the flowers. The game of the week is in the Big 12, actually. BYU at Texas Tech, 2 top 10 teams. Cougars, one of the last remaining unbeatens in college football. But it's Texas Tech favored by double digits. Again, Texas Tech has been so much better in the trenches than any other team in the Big 12 this year. They absolutely butt-whipped Kansas State over the weekend. I think Texas Tech wins and finally puts a kibosh on this BYU luck box season. A&M at Missouri. Tigers still have an outside shot at the college football playoff, but let's be honest, their backup quarterback's in. Purbule's hurt. I just don't. I'm not high on Missouri. But to be fair, A&M on the road can be tricky. They have not played well on the road this year. I know they beat LSU, but LSU quit. They barely got past Arkansas, and they barely got past Notre Dame. So I think there's a chance that the Missouri defense, right, their front seven, makes Marcel Reed one-dimensional, forces him to be a thrower, not a runner, and maybe A&M commits a penalty, gives Missouri a short field. I could absolutely see, right, like they're a touchdown favorite. I don't think I'd be laying a touchdown on the road with A&M right now, but I could definitely see them winning this game. And if they go 12-0, I mean, let's be honest, that's one of the more remarkable feats in recent memory. An SEC team going 12-0. That's why I think what Bama's doing is so impressive. Bama's one loss was to Florida State. They're probably going to go undefeated in the SEC. That is incredible in today's day and age, to go undefeated in an SEC gauntlet schedule. Impressive stuff. A&M is 3 wins away from doing that. All right, let's get to the Heisman conversation. I'll be honest, I kind of think there is a case to be made to buy Julian Sayin. I really do. I have been hot and heavy on Ty Simpson from the jump. I think he is the best quarterback in college football. But I'll be honest, my opinion is changing. I think Julian Sayin might have a case for it. He leads college football in completion percentage. And I thought for sure Penn State was going to knock him off his spot and create some havoc over the weekend. And to be fair, they did. The turnover was not Sayan's fault. It was a fumble by the running back. But still, they put themselves in a position to put some pressure on Sayan and cause a little bit of havoc. And Julian just overcame all of it. I mean, it helps when you've got an amazing wide receiving group around you, and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes. I mean, these guys are studs. Their offensive line is gettable. I think that's where, in a big game against a really good defense, I do think Sayan is going to have to overcome some pressure. But if you've got a Ty, so I've got Ty Simpson at 17-1. Pretty big ticket. I would buy some Sayan here. I really would. I think if it comes down to it, Mendoza Sayan, I think you're taking Sayan. I just do. First of all, Indiana's schedule was significantly easier. And Julian Sayan, I think, has played better. I think he has the completion rate, his ability to move in the pocket, I think is a little bit smoother. And I just think Ohio State, if you have two undefeated quarterbacks in the Big Ten, Ohio State and Indiana, you're not giving the Heisman Trophy to the Indiana guy. I'm sorry, Fernando. You've had a great year. You might be drafted ahead of Sayan, but Julian, I think, is right now deserves to be the Heisman favorite. But to be fair, Ty Simpson is right there. And I think there's a reason why, even though Simpson has one loss, he's still ahead of a guy like Marcel Reed, who's undefeated, because that's how good of a season Ty Simpson has had. I think if I had to do a ballot today, Sayan 1, Simpson 2, Mendoza 3, and then frankly, I'd put Jeremiah Love ahead of everyone else. I think he's the best player. He's the best overall player in college football. He's 40-1 right now. He's not going to win the award. I made a free bet on him this week at 20-1. He had an unbelievable game and still dropped in the ratings because that's how good of a year Julian Sayan's having, and Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson. And you're just not, based on what we've seen in years past, unless it's like a unicorn situation like Travis Hunter, it's just tough not to give it to one of these quarterbacks. So is it too late to buy Julian Sayan? No, I don't think so. Because I think if Ohio State wins out and their schedule is Cupcake City, other than the game at Michigan, I think Sayan wins the award. I think Simpson finishes second. So I might wait till the Michigan week to see what the price is. But I'm probably going to buy some Sayan at some point to balance my Simpson ticket, right? I have 17-1 on Ty Simpson. So right now, Julian Sayan plus 175, Mendoza plus 225, Simpson plus 350. I probably can put a couple of units on Sayan and, make 3 or 4 units back and, balance my action on Simpson. I still think there's a chance Ty Simpson wins the award because the SEC is just that much better than the Big Ten. And Sayan has so many weapons around him. To be fair, so does Simpson, but Jeremiah Smith and Tate, they're better than what the weapons that Alabama has. And Alabama's been banged up in the running game a lot this year. They haven't run it that well, where Ohio State has run it better, I think. So there's some cases to be made for Simpson, but I think if I had to make the vote today, I think I would give it to Julian Sayan. So that is my Heisman prediction segment for this week. I would buy some Sayan. Not yet, because I think the price will relatively stay the same over the next couple weeks because he doesn't really have any tough games. And I'm curious to see how Simpson handles the next week. Like if he explodes. He hasn't had a huge statistical game yet. What if he explodes against Auburn? What if he explodes against LSU down the stretch? Maybe Simpson can jump him. But I think Simpson Sayan right now. The SNS boys. That would be my 2 picks in the Heisman Trophy race. All right, it is time to get to the end of the show. We do 2 things at the end of each show. Before we do those 2 things, I want to remind you, please subscribe to the channel. I see a couple of you watching right now live. I thank you for that. I appreciate you. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button. Please continue to support the show. I know that this maybe seems like a fool's errand. Why are you starting a podcast right now? I'm just following my heart, following my passion. Again, I don't want this to be a gambling show. I don't want this to be me coming in here and giving out my picks for the games every week. I want this to be a place where you can come and ask me questions, pick my brain, and interact with me. That's why I do the show live. That's why I have the YouTube chat open. Ask questions. I'll answer them live on the show. This isn't scripted, guys. I have a rundown of topics I want to get to, and then I just go. I just pour out what I saw over the weekend, and I pour it all out on to this platform. And the goal is to grow the platform and to make myself available, make myself, willing to share what I see and how I see it. And hopefully you react accordingly. So I appreciate you guys watching. Please continue to support the channel. The morning after will continue to grow as we move forward. All right, Rise and Whine this week. Something I saw yesterday that made me really upset, and it's Jordan Love. I don't think we can take the Packers seriously as a Super Bowl contender. Yes, I know I picked them to make the Super Bowl before the season started. But when your two losses are to the Panthers and the Browns, I cannot take you seriously as a Super Bowl contender. Good teams hammer bad ones. And if they don't hammer them, they win the game. They figure out a way to win the game. You've had two opportunities to pummel bad teams this year. I'll even give you a third, the Cowboys. You were moving it up and down the field against Dallas. Defense couldn't get a stop. You couldn't get out of your own way on offense against Cleveland and Carolina. Your defense kept you in both of those games. Couldn't figure out a way to win either of them. Right now, the Packers at minus 1,000. That was the biggest money line upset in the NFL since 2021 when the Jags beat the Bills. Buffalo was a minus 1225 money line favorite in that game. A little history lesson for you there. But Jordan Love right now is 2-2 straight up as a double-digit favorite. If I can't trust you as a double-digit favorite to win, just win, how can I trust you in January against the really good teams? I think Green Bay plays up and down to their opponent, and I just don't trust volatile teams. I want you to be steady Eddie every week. I want to always see that ceiling. If I'm seeing the ceiling and the floor simultaneously the same week, probably means you're not trustable in January. So my Rise and Whine this week is Jordan Love and the Packers. I'm sorry, Jordan. I'm out on Green Bay as a true Super Bowl contender in 2025. All right, let's finish the show on a positive note. Morning Glory, something I saw over the weekend that really made me excited to either bet something or just give a round of applause to this particular individual. And it is Sam Darnold. How about slinging Sammy Sunshine? A dominant performance against the Commanders last night. I think he started like 16 for 16 or something like that. I know that in the grand scheme of it, we struggle to trust Sam Darnold, right? He's like your ex that keeps coming back into the picture. You have trust issues with him. He has more baggage than your ex, right? He started his career with the Jets. It was a disaster. He was seeing ghosts. But then he made a really good life decision. He was a free agent in 2023, and he decided to sign on as a backup quarterback with the San Francisco 49ers for a very small, modest $4.5 million, which in the quarterback world is like peanuts. He learned under Kyle Shanahan. It's almost like he went to quarterback rehab, right? He was down and out with the Jets. Most players will need a rehab after playing 4 years for the Jets. Then he decided to go to San Francisco and learn from one of the best offensive minds in the sport, Kyle Shanahan. And he picked himself back off the mat. Then he signed a 1-year, again, modest $10 million contract with the Vikings. Another genius offensive mind, Kevin O'Connell. And he flourished last year. The Vikings were 14-3. He looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the sport. And he cashed in. He handpicked his situation. He decided to link up with one of the Kubiak sons in Seattle. Signed a big whopping 3-year, $100 million deal, $55 million guaranteed, and we all ridiculed him in the offseason. You're a downgrade from Geno Smith. I don't trust Sam Darnold. He doesn't have Kevin O'Connell or Kyle Shanahan to bail him out. Sam Darnold right now looks like an MVP candidate, guys. He's not going to win the MVP this year, just the same reason that Drake May is not going to win the MVP this year. There's just too many great quarterbacks in front of him that have waited their turn or have already won the award. But you can make worse bets right now than Sam Darnold to win the MVP. I think it'll close significantly shorter. This is a legit Seattle offense, guys. It really is. They've got a number one receiver in Jackson Smith and Jigma. They've got two elite running backs in Charbonnet and Walker. They've got a good offensive line, and they've got a good offensive play caller. Their defense is elite. We all know how good Mike McDonald is as a defensive coach. The question was, could we trust Sam Darnold in the big moments to win a game? If you ask me right now, who do I trust more to win a big game, Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones? I think I would go Darnold. I think I would. I think Darnold has had the experience in the postseason a little bit more favorably. And I think he's learned his lesson. I think Daniel Jones is right there. But right now, in terms of the quarterback rehab award, I think Sam Darnold's in a little bit of a better situation. I think the Seahawks defense is better. And I just think he is a slightly further along in his development than Daniel Jones is. I think Jones really needs the Shane Steichen situation to go his way. Whereas, let's be honest, Sam Darnold right now, no one expected this with Clint Kubiak. This is a really impressive year for Sam Darnold and the Seattle Seahawks. They are a legit NFC contender in what is the toughest division right now in the NFL, the NFC West. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today's show. I appreciate you watching. I'm your host, Jarrett Smith. Episode 5 of The Morning After in the books. We will see you next week on the show. Thanks for watching.